Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. And who killed Charlie Kirk? Who was behind it? Was it that Patsy? Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. Hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, revolution is a way of life, and revolution is for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got some revolutionary dinner for y'all. We got to get back into the information. Who killed Charlie Kirk? Salute, soldier.
Let me deal first of all with the charge laid by Benjamin Netanyahu, by the ADL in the United States, and by pundits here in the United Kingdom. You don't get to say that it is anti-Semitic to suspect the hand of Israel in the slaying of Charlie Kirk. Partly because you have slain, assassinated more political leaders than any other country on the earth just in my lifetime. Don't make me go back to Lord Moyne. Don't make me go back to Count Bernadotte of Sweden. Don't make me go back to the British sergeants hanging booby-trapped in the orange groves in Jaffa. Don't make me go that far. Let me just stick to my own political lifespan. You, Israel, have been assassinating people all over the world, in Europe, in the Middle East, and further afield, all of my political lifetime. You assassinated almost half of the government of Yemen just 10 days ago. You don't get to say that it's anti-Semitic to suspect you might have had a hand in assassinating Charlie Kirk when you told us to marvel at your percipience and at your ingenuity, your engineering skills, and your patience when you waited years to explode every pager in Lebanon, man, woman, and child, notwithstanding. You don't get to say how good you are at killing, but call it anti-Semitic if somebody suspects that you may have killed Charlie Kirk, especially when there are sundry reasons to suspect that you might. And they're multiplying by the hour. When you scrubbed or caused to be scrubbed from YouTube the entirety of the episode of Charlie Kirk, when he openly states that you stood down on October the 7th, that it was an inside job, that you were responsible for the events on October 7th. Where is it? Where is it, Mr. YouTube? Who told you to scrub that edition? That is circumstantial evidence that Israel wants to disguise the fact that Charlie Kirk, formerly a slavish supporter of all things Israel and a proponent of some mythical, unbreakable Judeo-Christian civilization, had begun to turn decisively against you. He had begun to call the Epstein affair for what it is. He said, the Epstein affair is Mossad. Epstein is Mossad. He said, not me, that he was afraid that Israel might harm him. He said, not me, that the pro-Israel donors who had fattened his Turning Point USA organization to the tune of $40 million were now abandoning him and threatening him with complete financial collapse of his organization because he invited Tucker Carlson, the world's preeminent broadcaster, to speak at a Turning Point event in the course of the latter part of this year. He said, not me, that it was passing strange, that it was perfectly permissible to criticize Israel in Israel, but that he and others like him on the conservative right in the United States had to be bullied, bludgeoned, browbeaten, bribed, or threatened with the removal of bribes if they did the same. He said all of these things, and he's not alone. Israel has lost. Candace Owens has lost. Tucker Carlson has lost. Steve Bannon. There is a massive hemorrhage of support for Israel on the American right. You might say too little, you might say too late, given their whole shtick is supposed to be put America first, supposed to be MAGA, not Israel first, but America first. But that's what's been happening. And there was a very real fear on the part of Shapiro and other slaves to Israel in the United States that Kirk, with his millions of followers, might go the way of Candace Owens, another conservative figure that used to love Israel, now cannot abide Israel, might go the way of Tucker Carlson, might go the way of Steve Bannon. So you definitely had a motive. Let's be honest, Mr. Netanyahu. It would have been a catastrophe for you if Kirk's current late trajectory over the last days and weeks of his all too short life were to continue down the road that may have turned him into your enemy. And there's lots of forensic and circumstantial reasons for believing that the fella they've got under arrest, who the governor of Utah recently, in the last hour or two, pointed out has not confessed to the murder of Charlie Kirk. Therefore, he's the alleged murderer of Charlie Kirk. There's many questions which I and Jackson Hinkle and Chris Hedges will all be probing over the course of this show this evening. But some of them are such a standout, I really should mention them in the monologue. You see, when I look at the face of the man going up the stairs without a rifle, and I look at the face of the guy, the patsy, who...
Revolutionary salute to my brother D-Money, highly blessed, walking for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Say, long live your pops, big dog. We always ride with you. The south side of Atlanta got you. I appreciate the love from the south side of Atlanta. Long live my pops, the legendary Reverend J.E. Daniels. May his legendary name live forever. Appreciate the love, family. Salute. Absolutely love. Long live my pops. His revolutionary work continue through me and the House of Revolution.
Had his father turn him in, his father, a right-wing Republican MAGA donor, turned him in, said that he confessed, though the youth is now denying that. When I look at the two faces, cheek by jowl, juxtaposed, I very, very much doubt whether these two faces are the same. When you discover that the fella who we are told is the killer was receiving visitors with out-of-state plates in the weeks before the events at the university in Utah, when you look at the not one but two decoys that emerged from the crowd in the tumult after the foul assassination. One of them, Zin, a Zionist Jew, saying, I did it, I did it, shoot me, shoot me. The same man who was convicted under the Terrorism Act for falsely claiming that a marathon was going to be bombed in the aftermath of the horrific crime that took place at the Boston Marathon some years before. The same man, Zin, who says he was an eyewitness to the horrific terrorist attack on 9/11, coming under, as it is, increased scrutiny all the time. When you wonder why, in all of Utah, not even 1% of the population is Jewish. Scarcely more will be identifying as Zionist. That of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, Mr. Zinn happened to walk into Charlie Kirk's event, and when Kirk was assassinated, claim that he was the assassin and invite people to shoot him. When you consider the questions over the gun, the questions over where the gun was procured, the questions over whether Discord did display what the government in the US claims that it displayed, but which Discord denies ever appeared on their platform. When you discover that the bodyguards that were guarding Charlie Kirk were all of them involved in the most bizarre baseball-style hand signals in the literal seconds before the fatal shot was fired. When you consider the implausibility of this runt Robinson having scaled a drain pipe, changed his clothes, picked up a rifle someone had dropped for him that presumably he'd never fired before, and with one single shot pierced fatally the vital organ in the throat of Charlie Kirk. When you consider the photographs, video of somebody running with a handgun in the crowd, handgun out in the crowd, in the immediate aftermath of the event. When you consider the drone which passed over the murder site within 30 seconds of the fatal shot being fired. When you recognize that Israel had motive and that Israel had the means and that Israel had the opportunity, you realize that there's every reason to suspect the hand of Israel in this crime. As it happens, I myself don't believe that they were responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk. I'm merely saying that you'd be a fool not to entertain the possibility that they were. Before I go into who I think is responsible, let me reiterate a point I made a few weeks ago, which some have difficulty understanding and others have difficulty accepting. I believe that to pose the United States and Israel as alternatives in anything, in everything, is to entertain a false dichotomy. You see, for me, America is Israel, and Israel is America. Israel is the 51st state of America. The Mossad is the CIA. The CIA is the Mossad. If you don't believe the extent to which these two countries have merged, then take a look at that Wailing Wall picture from this afternoon, where Marco Rubio, supposedly in Israel, to read the riot act about the attack on Qatar, about which more in a minute. Huckabee, Rubio, and Netanyahu, all of them kippered up, kissing that wall again. The abasement of the United States political class to the iconography of Israel, the never-ending subvention of money and material between the United States and Israel has effectively erased any difference that there is in these two states. Having said which, I believe the American deep state killed Charlie Kirk for the reasons that I have already given, for the reasons that Charlie Kirk was emerging as a clear and present danger to them. Because Charlie Kirk was papabile. He was potentially presidential. He could have run for president against whomsoever Donald Trump had in mind to hold the fort until his own children were capable of taking up the reins. I believe that they wanted to sow such civil discord in the United States, that civil war, or the language of civil war, or the legislative program to crush his political opponents in the United States was a powerful reason why they wanted rid of a potentially troublesome priest with a mass congregation of many millions of college-aged kids in the United States of America. Just two more quick things on the subject of coincidences. Do you know that the first media outfit in the entire world to broadcast and publish the events in Utah was the Jerusalem Post? And did you know that both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu both announced the death of Charlie Kirk at precisely to the minute the same time, 3:02? What's the odds on that? What's the odds on the President of the United States, 10 hours time difference away from Tel Aviv, and the Prime Minister of Israel announcing the death of an American influencer at precisely 3:02, each of them at exactly the same time? I've got to move on because I have to have time for the astounding events that took place in Doha, where there is right now an emergency meeting of Arab and Muslim leaders to decide how they're going to respond to an act of base treachery, an act of international piracy, an act of international terrorism, which Israel boasts as to having carried out. Whose treachery? Israel's treachery? Well, yeah, I mean, Qatar's been your best friend in the Persian Gulf, and for a very, very long time, and more deeply than any of the others, and with a good deal less dignity than their neighbors in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. So yeah, you betrayed Qatar. But the real act of betrayal was by Donald Trump, who left that very same Qatar dripping in gold and emeralds and pearls as gifts from the very rulers of Qatar that he willfully allowed Israel to strike with its missiles just the other day, and then took off, metaphorically, in his new $400 million aeroplane given to him as a present from the very rulers that Israel has just utterly and ritually humiliated. Much, much more coming up over the course of the next 2 hours. It's the mother of all talk. Only Jackson Hinkle, one of the great influencers for the better of people in the United States and increasingly around the world. He's a political analyst and he's the host of a great show called Legitimate Targets. Jackson, welcome back. We didn't expect to see you again quite so soon, but you're right at the best place to analyze the importance of what happened to Charlie Kirk and to speculate, for we are all entitled to speculate as to who might have done it and why they might have done it.
Well, thank you for having me back on the show. I have a lot of questions, obviously, that I've been airing out on my Twitter. I wouldn't dare do that on this platform because sometimes there are questions known as forbidden questions that you're not allowed to ask on certain platforms. But individuals like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Mike Cernovich, and the great journalists Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil at the Gray Zone have been documenting what they were witnessing in the months and weeks leading up to this tragedy in Utah, which was a war of epic proportions going on behind the scenes involving at its center Charlie Kirk, as well as U.S. President Donald Trump, Netanyahu, the state of Israel, and the state of Israel's closest allies in the United States, who happen to be donors to Charlie Kirk's TPUSA organization. Unfortunately, for those donors and those who seek to spread the message of the Zionists in the United States, Charlie Kirk was beginning to wake up to what was really going on with Israel and the rest of the world. And he was challenging this publicly to a lesser extent, privately to a great extent, even doing it directly face-to-face to U.S. President Donald Trump amid the 12-day war with Iran when Trump was considering striking Iran. Charlie Kirk paid a very large price for this in the sense that his donors canceled on him. They threatened that they would do that, and that's exactly what they did after Charlie Kirk said he was going to host Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith at the annual AmFest convention in December of this year. Now, I'm not necessarily coming on your broadcast to say that this story and the many other facets that go along with it are connected to the tragedy in Utah this week. But I do find it extremely suspect that anyone is out there telling us that we're not allowed to ask any questions about this, given that in the last interview Charlie Kirk did with Ben Shapiro, he asked Ben Shapiro, don't you think we should be allowed to question Israel? He asked him 6 questions about that. And personally, I think we should all do exactly what Charlie was saying and do just that.
I'm into that. We'll come back to some of these key differences that were clearly emerging. He's obviously a man, he was obviously a man of some courage. He faced down Donald Trump and had a shouting match, a one-way shouting match, with Donald Trump shouting at him over the Iran war. He was opposed to it, as you say, but these are not the only questions you've been asking, and I think millions of people are asking. It's a bit of a stretch, isn't it, to believe that this fellow who was changing his clothes like some kind of chameleon who first had a gun, then didn't have one, then did have one, then didn't have one, had a gun that was left for him by someone else, therefore he was firing it for the first time, that particular weapon, and who left no trace, no fingerprints, no DNA, despite all the changes of clothes on the roof, before the roof and after the roof, suddenly and helpfully is intercepted by decoys or stooges who are seeking to divert the attention of the security forces. All kinds of things don't really pass the smell test in this affair. Am I right?
You are right. There's too much to even cover in one segment, I think, here. And the real shame is the FBI is not taking the time to answer any of the questions that you just brought up, or the questions that go beyond that even. They've been very tight-lipped, and they did mention one thing, though. The FBI came out a few days ago and said that foreign intelligence had assisted in the investigation that was ongoing regarding this tragedy in Utah. No updates on which foreign intelligence, what intelligence was provided, if any, if the intelligence personnel were on the ground in the United States, whether they were handling any evidence, so on and so forth. But yes, there's many questions about the suspect, who, by the way, was, is just exposed by the governor of Utah, Governor Cox. He came out and said that the suspect is, in fact, not cooperating, and he is not admitting guilt in this incident. So that draws even more questions. Of course, you mentioned the chameleon-like character of the switching of the clothes. Why is it that there is absolutely no CCTV footage or security camera footage of the suspect with the Mauser bolt-action rifle? Why, if he disassembled the rifle, was it reassembled in the wooded area near the school? I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this. Also, one more thing, the former deputy director of the FBI came out just 2 days ago and said that initially Kash Patel's FBI claims that the suspect was wearing tactical gear during this tragedy, during the incident. And seemingly, I guess he changed his clothes again because there's no footage of him wearing this tactical gear. We only have the photos of him wearing the black clothes. So I'm left wondering, like a lot of people, what is really going on here?
Help us, Jackson, for those who are not in the United States, not with the zeitgeist that you are as a young political figure of some note. We don't know who's who, many of us, in the United States. What was Charlie Kirk, and how did he differ from other important figures on the right?
Well, it's an important question. Charlie Kirk is a man who was deeply involved in politics from a young age. He started Turning Point USA, which is a predominantly university age organization. Its members are all across the country. If I'm not mistaken, there's thousands of these chapters of this organization all across the United States, and they have chapters outside the United States in different countries. So it's really an international organization of young people who promote traditional values and are described as conservative. The key point here, though, is that through this organization, he built the infrastructure amongst the youth that rallied Donald Trump to his election victories. Donald Trump said as much after he won the 2024 election. And as you correctly pointed out at the start of this segment, it would be no mistake to say that Charlie Kirk would, in fact, run for president one day if he wanted to. He'd have the capability, the infrastructure, the donors behind him to do it, and he could very well win. He was groomed, I would say, from a young age by the Zionist lobby. He visited Israel many times. He was a very staunch advocate of the Zionist cause. He really was one of the main proponents amongst youth of Judeo-Christian values, as they call it. And that's why so many people were shocked to find out these new revelations that are being aired out by Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, who are both very close friends of Charlie, about how that relationship soured, why it soured, and how Charlie was fearful about what was to come, given the fact that he was a very big Zionist for the right-wing youth movement in the United States.
Now, Donald Trump's behaving very strangely over the whole thing. Asked about it the next morning, about the death of a young man who had given his whole life, really, to the Donald Trump cause, about whom he'd spoken so eloquently the night before. He was asked how he was coping with the death of his young friend. He said, okay, I guess we're concentrating on our new ballroom. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be bigly. It's going to be the best ballroom in the world, and all of his usual hyperbole. And then he went to a ball game, and he was literally disco dancing and pouting. How devastated is Donald Trump by this turn of events?
I think Donald Trump is fearful, and that's not me saying that. I think this, is something that shocked him to his core. I don't think Donald Trump is the type of guy that necessarily knows how to handle something like that. He's usually not in a position where he has to be fearful of anyone or anything. Now, what I suggest everyone here do is, at some point after this live stream ends, go to the Gray Zone and read the article that was published by Max Blumenthal and Anya Parmpill, because the source that they cited in this article was not just a close friend of Charlie Kirk, but also a Trump White House insider. And this source went on record, I guess anonymously went on record, to say that the Trump White House and Trump himself is fearful of Netanyahu, that not too long ago, the Secret Service caught Israeli intelligence placing electronic devices on the emergency response vehicles of their own cars. And this source also said that they do not believe the official FBI story about what is going on right now. And they believe that there were outside powerful forces responsible for what happened. Max Blumenthal stated that in his conversation with Tim Dillon just yesterday. So I think Trump is fearful and he doesn't know what to do.
So what happens next? Some of these idiots, so-called leftists in America, openly glorying in the slaughter of a young man in front of his wife and children, scarred forever for life, glorying about the death of a fascist, murdered in cold blood. They don't seem to realize that the next guy murdered in cold blood might be somebody they approve of, somebody they support, or even themselves. Are we about to enter into a maelstrom of tit-for-tat violence? Are we heading towards civil war in America?
I sure hope not. But myself, Haz al-Din, the chairman of the American Communist Party, who's a close friend of mine, he has been, we've all been predicting that this is kind of where America is headed. A lot of people talk about, civil war, this sort of thing. But I don't think anyone has any real conception of what that would look like in today's day and age. It wouldn't look like two conventional armies facing off against one another. It would kind of look like what we witnessed this week. It would look like what the streets of Chicago look and sound like on a nightly basis, or Philadelphia or Los Angeles or New York for that matter. It would look like sporadic violence happening left and right. Most people's normal lives would continue as they do, but you might have a breakdown of essential services, of society as you know it to a certain degree. And there would be more and more chaos and more of this violence happening all throughout the country. And maybe if it reaches a certain fever pitch, you might even have certain armed groups, factions that take shape and have different power centers across the country, different gangs, different militias, different political organizations. And I think this is a result of America's failure to address the root causes of these issues that the American people are facing. Why are we waging all these wars? It's what you've always been saying. We've always been saying, why not focus on the issues that matter to average people instead of the issues that matter to the top 1% of our country?
And I want to share with you here one of the craziest clips I have seen yet connected to this whole Charlie Kirk shooting. This is from a different angle, and this shows a guy that is sitting right out here, front left of Charlie. And the second that Charlie shot, this guy does something super suspicious, and some are claiming he has something in his hand. Some speculate a hand pistol, a handheld palm pistol that is squeezed, and he is one of the closest people to Charlie with no one in between. Whatever he's doing, it is super suspect, and it's at the exact moment. I have to say, the timing of the movement of his hand, the gunshot, and everything else, it's all right there. And I'll run the clip so you guys can see how this unfolded.
How many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
Counting gang violence.
Great.
Counting gang violence.
Great.
So do you now see what I'm talking about? What is this sticking out from between his fingers right here? And he squeezes something. Looking right at him, the closest person to Charlie on the same side, he was hit. Regardless if this was what shot the shot or not, this guy did something. The timing is crazy. And I got to be honest, he has something in his hand. You can tell it's pointed right at Charlie the moment he shot. This is the closest guy to him. This is crazy. We've seen a lot of gestures and movements and a lot of talk of a larger orchestration. What I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah, this guy did something, and it is super, super suspect. Is this guy part of the whole thing here? Well, that's up to you guys to decide. Join me for the live show, going live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, where I'm talking about
to weeks after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the fog of evidence pointing to Israel's fingerprints on this broad daylight strike keeps getting denser, louder, and more disturbing. What we're looking at is not just a tragic killing, but a carefully orchestrated takedown of one of the few rising conservative voices who was beginning to call out Zionism without fear.
And look at this woman. That's the one that gets this shot done, okay? I'm going to make myself even smaller so that you can see more. I'm going to play it. And
So, do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
he puts it down.
Too many.
Look at it. Then he brings it up again. He talks to someone. He gets a signal. He's going to pull out the phone again. And I'm sorry, you're going to have to see this. So
Do you know how
it's going to be horrible. There you go. That's your sign. Go again.
over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting
Watch.
gang violence?
He tried at first and missed. Watch these hands.
Violence.
Watch him again.
10 years.
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Like, he jumps. When he finally gets him, he jumps.
I was standing from probably the third row in the bottom. I heard the shot ring out. I looked to my left, and then I looked over to my right. I saw him slump over in his chair forward. He slumped over. He had blood coming from the left side of his neck down his shirt, and he slumped over and he was carried off. Get off me! Get off me!
Emotions are running high right now.
In fact, the number of video clips showing Charlie at various points questioning Israel's role in global manipulation is overwhelming. Too many to even show you in this single piece. He was stepping into dangerous territory, demanding accountability from Mossad, linking Epstein's shadowy network to Israel, and pointing fingers at the deep state. That is not something Tel Aviv forgives.
I think the majority mover of Gen Z and Gen Z conservatives is exhaustion.
Precisely.
Would you guys think that's a fair categorization?
Yes, sure.
I mean, again, there is like an isolated, like, weirdo, I hate Jews. We don't like that. No one in decent society wants that. But instead, it's kind of like, can we just, I don't know, make it so I can buy a home?
Yeah.
Or like deport people?
Exactly.
Does that resonate with you?
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
If you're not anti-Israel, you don't wish them harm, you're not, like cheering on Iran.
No, I support Israel. I think they're our ally. I want them.
But you would be called an anti-Semite by some people for saying this.
And I think that's ridiculous. I don't hate Jews because I think a nation should defend themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, I think that's the most ridiculous thing ever.
I feel like it's becoming like the word racism. Like, we just disagree with them, so we just have to call them a name. I don't think they're actually anti-Semitic. I think people just can't agree with them and they can't prove them wrong. So they just throw a word out and be like, you're anti-Semitic because you think that we should stop sending our money there.
Something that I see amongst the people I'm around, I do see more like general disdain towards, just being honest, Jewish people.
That's correct.
Just because they're constantly being told that you hate Jews. And it's like, fine. If you're going to say I hate Jews over and over and over again, like, if I'm going to be convicted of the crime, I might as well do the crime. I fear the same thing happens with all the talk of race. The more we talk about it, the more we bring it up, the more racism actually happens.
This is like, I try to tell, thank you for saying this. Like, because like, I try to tell these people and they're like, we must get more aggressive. And so like, let me ask a question. If we were to remove, like if people said what Tucker said is anti-Semitic, I don't hold that view, but it's like a lot of people on Twitter are like calling us out and like, whatever. That's not going to happen.
And as if we are all fools, they wasted no time pivoting. Ben Shapiro is suddenly back on the road, restarting his campus tour, presenting himself as the ready-made replacement for Charlie, as if the machine had a backup plan in waiting. At the same time, Rabbi Shmuley didn't even allow the dust of blood to dry before rushing out appeals for more funds, almost as though Charlie's assassination was just another campaign opportunity.
I saw a lot of rumors online today. I was made aware of this by my team, that I canceled some sort of college tour. That's bullshit. I saw those rumors. They are false. I will be coming to college campuses, many of them this year. So will we all, I am sure, because we're Americans and we're not going to be deterred. Charlie's voice is not silent. We're going to pick up that bloodstained microphone where Charlie left it. And to those who would intimidate, who would seek to stop us, who would seek to end free discussion.
Before I go deeper, take a moment right now, like this video, force the algorithm to push this truth despite YouTube's attempts to bury it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it so we can keep pushing back against the suppression. Watch this clip. It's pure insider work and you'll see it for yourself.
Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals. And he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years and can't find him. Some doofus jerk-off reporter with a camera crew waltzes right into his hideout and interviews him. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it. Another social engineering project to change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people.
Now, the latest update will blow your mind. In my earlier videos, I replayed clips and clues about what Charlie was facing and how his tone was shifting against Zionism. But today, I'm presenting two concrete pieces of evidence that strip away any remaining illusions. The first is a video that YouTube and TikTok are actively suppressing under the pretext of fighting false news. But make no mistake, this clip is real, it's authentic, and it came from eyewitnesses present at Charlie's assassination. What it shows is nothing short of shocking, a micro-surveillance drone flying in the sky just minutes before Charlie was taken out. And according to event organizers, no drones were scheduled, no drone coverage was approved. The presence of this device can only mean one thing, a clandestine surveillance operation most likely linked to the larger assassination plot. Insert. And here's the kicker, the drone's trajectory lined up with the very same angle from where the sniper's bullet was fired. That is not coincidence. That is coordination. The drone hovered close enough to give planners a clear live feed, granting them precision timing and visibility for both the kill shot and the escape. Combine that with the clean professional nature of the execution, and you can dismiss any fantasy about a random college kid with a rusty rifle. This was polished, rehearsed, and surgical hallmarks of a state-backed hit squad. The sophistication screams Mossad.
What happened on the aircraft? Okay, first off, what we have to understand, there's only one plane that actually crashed.
No,
okay,
there were three.
No, the building's imploded.
Okay,
if a plane's going to hit a building, why would the building fall down?
Time out. Flight 93, did it exist?
Flight 93 existed, yes.
Okay, so who tried to hijack that plane?
They sacrificed those people to make it look like Bush was targeted because they wanted to cover up Bush's involvement.
So
he just happened to be in Texas reading a book to elementary kids, and they were reading a sign on a whiteboard
let me say
that talked about towers falling, Charlie.
Anti-Semitism.
We've been lied to since the beginning of this country. Jews, Freemasons, all of it's a satanic agenda. Israel is the synagogue of Satan. They're killing innocent people in Palestine over the guise of sovereignty. New World Order is coming, Charlie.
Guys, let me tell you, anti-Semitism is literally a brain cancer, as you could see.
How is this anti-Semitic, Charlie? How is it anti-Semitic?
How is it anti-Semitic?
How am I hating on Jews when I'm saying that
you keep interrupting me. Israel did 9/11 is a rather anti-Semitic thing to say. Explain to me Flight 93 and the families aboard that lost their loved ones. Who actually was the hijacker? Was it a Mossad agent?
No.
Okay, who was it?
The government put them there.
No, who was it?
They crashed a plane intentionally to make it look like George W. Bush was targeted.
Who was the hijacker? No, this is important. They can never answer this question. Who was the hijacker?
They didn't have real hijackers, Charlie. They were plants.
Okay. So when
they were plants, CIA, Mossad created
So when
Hamas.
they got the black box, of course, it was all just like a conspiracy.
Just like they found the passport miraculously 2 miles down from the crash site in
I'm sorry,
New York.
what?
They just happened to find one of the hijackers' passports laying on the ground 2 miles away from the crash site in New York. It just happened to be there. They just walked up and found it. They just randomly happened to find a perfectly good passport.
With that piece
Look
of
it
data.
up. Look up the passport.
Look, here, there's so much wrong with your worldview, but the biggest.
Meanwhile, back in Washington, on the very same day Charlie was assassinated, Senate Republicans sneaked through a bill criminalizing the boycott of Israel. Do you really think that's coincidence? It's textbook distraction. While the nation was glued to the shocking murder of a public figure, Congress quietly locked in another weapon for Zionists, the legal silencing of dissent against a genocidal state slaughtering millions in Gaza. To add insult to injury, the FBI's behavior is raising its own questions. Viral comparisons show inconsistencies between the wanted image circulated during the manhunt and the supposed mugshot after arrest. Classic Mossad sleight of hand, swapping images, muddying trails, and keeping the public guessing while the real operatives slip back into the shadows. But if you still doubt Mossad's role, I've got one more thing. Watch the footage of Charlie hammering Israel and exposing the sham of so-called Judeo-Christian values. That's enough to sign his death warrant in Zionist eyes.
Yeah, that's right. And we must understand that if we were to do forceful regime change, sounds good. Lindsey Graham is cheering for that. What would happen to the refugees? Where would they go? Millions of people going to the West. The country could fall into civil war. and understand they're warriors there. These are the Persians. They were a great power for 1,000 years. Not even the Romans could defeat Persia. Now, I'm not saying they're comparable to our Marines or to our Air Force, but is that really the battle that we want in front of us? And President Trump understands this astutely. He is
Even respected journalists like Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone have warned of the same thing. Mossad's assassination tactics are so advanced, so refined, that even the White House lives in fear of crossing them. A department specifically designed for international political killings operating with impunity exists within Israel's security apparatus. That terrifies even Washington insiders. Think about it. If this machinery can topple leaders abroad, silencing a conservative commentator in the US would be child's play. It's no wonder indicted felon Donald Trump himself is rumored to be spooked by the reach of this operation.
Does the President of the United States fear for his life?
Yes. Yes. I mean, obviously he fears for his life. And I was told that he feared for his life before the 2 assassination attempts, one coming within a millimeter of striking his head. I mean, let's not forget about that.
But I mean, just to clarify, he doesn't fear for his life because of Ireland.
I mean, I've been told, yes, that Israel is a major source of concern for Trump. I mean, think about it. What would happen
this
if
is
the
our
president
ally.
if he
That's why I'm
suspended arms
confused.
to if he suspended arms to a country that carries out assassinations all across the globe, that specializes in assassinations, that has an entire wing of its intelligence services that conducts assassinations, including with household goods like pagers, would you not be scared? So yes, Trump is scared. And what I learned from this source, who is a Trump insider, someone who talks to who talks to people in the Oval Office, people close to Trump, is that during one of Netanyahu's many visits to the U.S. this year, some figures in his retinue, Israeli agents, placed electronic devices on emergency response Secret Service vehicles. The Secret Service found them and they reported this to the White House. You know, these would be emergency response vehicles that would respond to an incident potentially involving the president.
Thank you for watching. Stand with me against this tide of lies and silence. Support my work.
Let's give weight to that. Well, over the weekend, a bit more information has come out about the alleged assassin for Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson. And we're going to go over what they're telling us and what we see, the differences in what they tell us versus what we see, and just also some of the inconsistencies in the things that they're saying. They have pieced law enforcement, being they, and many people online who believe law enforcement, people that believe the very first thing the government tells them, they have crafted a particular story. And there are just holes in this story. And we should be looking at those holes and questioning. And it's up to the government, it's up to federal officials and law enforcement to actually fill those holes. And if they cannot fill those holes, that leaves plot holes that leave many of us wondering, what is the actual real story going on here? So first things first, and I want to try my best to give equal weight to those who say it absolutely was Tyler Robinson and, in some sort of trans death cult that killed Charlie Kirk. Let's give weight to that and see if there's any there. And then let's also look at all of the stuff that isn't adding up and then say, how do you fit this into this narrative? I think it's also important to remember that law enforcement has a lot of pressure to come up with somebody, right? They don't want to look like idiots. They don't want to look like failures. They don't want to look inept. And so it is in their best interest. And, and they did, right? They arrested 2 guys originally that ended up not being the shooter. And so they kind of look dumb as it is. And they want to get somebody. And they've got this kid. And it just feels like they're making all of these pieces fit. Now, the first rebuttal to this is people will say, but Kim, the kid confessed. He confessed and his father turned him in. But did he? Let's go ahead and look at this.
And anything new on the investigation? You say he admitted that, confessed? No, not again. He has not confessed to authorities. He is not cooperating. But all the people around him are cooperating, and I think that's very important. There were reports yesterday that we can confirm that his roommate was indeed a boyfriend who is transitioning from male to female. That's information that the FBI had mentioned yesterday. We can confirm that as well, and that he is cooperating with authorities as well.
Okay, so Tyler Robinson has not confessed. He is not cooperating. People around him are, but Tyler himself apparently is denying that he did this if he's not confessing. I mean, maybe he's not denying either. Maybe he's just saying nothing at all, but he's not cooperating and he's certainly not confessing. So there goes that theory out the window that he confessed. Now, then you might say, well, then why did his dad turn him in? Because the reports initially were that the father, that he confessed to the dad went to him, but these are all rumors, right? This is all playing the game of telephone where it's like, well, I had heard that he went to the dad and told the dad that the father confronted him and the kid said, yeah, I was the shooter. And then he said he'd rather commit suicide than be turned in. And so, but then the youth pastor got involved and convinced him, right? This is the story that we've all been told. But that's a game of telephone. We don't know how much of that's been stretched. It very well could have been that the father saw the kid on the surveillance, this surveillance that they showed us. And this right here is, by the way, and what I don't like about this image is when I first saw this image and then when they showed us the mugshot of Tyler, they don't really look the same. And my first reaction was, this doesn't look like the same guy, because this guy has a thinner mouth and Tyler had thicker lips and whatnot. And then the law enforcement comes out and says, oh, that's because this is AI generated. What the hell are they doing using AI generated images? They shouldn't be doing that at all. And their excuse is, well, we needed to AI enhance it. So that means you could create this into a completely different person. Law enforcement should not be using AI to enhance a person's image, because then you end up with the wrong potential person. And really, how can we trust that you haven't fully manipulated the face altogether and that it's somebody completely different? And now you're using AI. And if we normalize this and they're going to use AI, they could just say anybody's a culprit, essentially, and just plaster their face on a suspect and then say, well, see, we got the guy and it was you. And these are the images. We can't normalize them using AI, but they used AI on this. And I don't like that. But nonetheless, allegedly, what we're told, again, a game of telephone, is that the father saw these images, recognized his son, went to his son and said, hey, was this you? And the son was like, yeah. And then the kid turned, and then, they got him to turn himself in. What if the father just said, hey, I think you need to just turn yourself into the police as somebody that was there. You were the one running from the roof or whatever. I don't know what the conversation was between him and his dad. It's all speculation. And we have to remember that. So maybe the kid then said, all right, fine, I'll do that. And maybe the whole conversation was, and we'll clear your name, son. Don't worry. We'll turn you in. We'll do the right thing. And then we'll clear your name. I mean, that could have been the conversation, but that's not the story we got, right? Instead, we got this story of he confessed and the father turned him in. And in reality, it turns out the kid didn't confess, because that's now what law enforcement, or the governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, is actually saying he didn't turn himself in. So you have to remember, he didn't turn himself in. This is an AI generated image right here. AI generated, meaning we don't actually know. I mean, that in and of itself shouldn't be used. And then Kash Patel today. So then you might say, well, but there was a note, and the trans lover has a note. And so we know now it was this kid because of this note. This note, you mean, that doesn't exist?
Did he write a written note before the assassination attempt? That's what the governor said yesterday. And what did that say? If you could.
So what I'm able to say, I'm sorry. So what I'm able to say is I addressed it partially earlier, is that the written note, we believe, what did exist. And we have evidence to show what was in that note, which is, and I'm going to summarize, basically saying, the suspect wrote a note saying, I have the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it. That note was written before the shooting. Evidence of its existence, we now have learned, existed before the shooting, was in the location, in the suspect and partner's home. But we have since learned that the note, even though it has been destroyed, we have found forensic evidence of the note, and we have confirmed what that note says because of our aggressive interview posture at the FBI.
aggressive interview posture, first of all, what does that even mean? Like torture? Like threatening the trans partner and saying basically, do as we say or else you're going to go down for this crime. You could be an accessory to this murder and you could serve, well, you could get the death penalty too, I think, in the state of Utah. So what kind of aggressive interviewing were you doing? And so now there's this alleged note that doesn't exist. I mean, he's basically said, we don't have any, this note doesn't exist. He's claiming it was destroyed, but they somehow know what was on the note based on their aggressive interview tactics. That's all they've got. So they don't have anything. They don't have a note. They just have some kid that they're scaring to death, telling him he's basically going to get the death penalty. And he's sitting there saying, yeah, okay, there was a note. And this is what the note said, that he had the gun. And even then, even if there was a note, how does this trans lover for sure know that Charlie was the one, I mean, that Tyler was the one who wrote that note? How do you know that it wasn't the setup? I mean, look, if you were going to be like, you know, the CIA or Mossad or whoever doing, you know, or just any nefarious organization, you know, you could be some underground, you know, ops style organization that sets people up and does assassinations and whatnot. If you're going to frame somebody, because you got to frame somebody for it. You don't want it to lead back to you and your organization and your motive. So you're going to frame them. Who are you going to pick to frame? You're going to pick somebody like this. You're going to find the kid that you could kind of radicalize a little bit online. You can maybe plant some evidence online, and you could maybe even sneak in and slip a note in. You know, you could do all kinds of things. That would be your MO, obviously. So we have to also keep that in mind, that if this was a professional job done by professionals, they're going to have a fall guy. Who are they going to pick? Who are they going to pin this to be the patsy? The kid with the trans lover, right? Who's online gaming. They could stick all kinds of notes online, and you could make them look like they've existed for weeks online. If you're good, if you're a good organization, if you've got all the resources and all the AI and all the tech at your fingertips, you'd be able to manipulate a lot of stuff. But certainly the easiest thing to manipulate is this like fake note that was suddenly destroyed. And now you're bullying a kid into telling you what was on that note. Okay, so then on top, now here, let's talk about the changing of clothing. This is the other part so now we know he hasn't confessed. There is no note. And now let's talk about this. How did he get onto campus with the gun, and how did he get away from campus with the gun? The problem is they've seen him wearing multiple different clothing. And they're trying to reconcile this, because they show us this image of him going to campus. He's wearing a maroon shirt, shorts, gray shorts, black shoes, a backpack. And they're saying that's Tyler Robinson. He parked his car and he walked to campus, and that's what he was wearing. And they say that when they arrested him, he was also wearing this. So they got him on camera going to campus wearing this. And then when he was arrested, he was wearing this. But the shooter was wearing all dark clothing. And this is what the governor says about that.
Yes. So when he's first spotted on campus, he has different clothing on, and then he changes clothing on the roof, and then changed back into that clothing at some point, so that when he was apprehended, when he was arrested, the clothing matched the clothing he had on before the shooting here at UVU.
Yes. So when he was first spotted on campus, he had different clothing on, and then he changed his clothing on the roof, and then changed back into that clothing at some point, so that when he was apprehended, arrested, the clothing matched the clothing that he had on before the shooting. Right. Okay. Does that make so somehow he goes to campus wearing this maroon outfit? How do you hide the gun? Right. Because they claim that the way he got the gun on and off campus is in his tight jeans, by the way. And this is let me see what this, let's watch this video here and see what this is. So this is him alleged. So this is, okay, so he changed apparently at some point, because the governor said that he changed on the roof. But now we've got this other image of him apparently walking with the limp. They're claiming because the rifle is shoved into his tight jeans. And he's walking by this camera again, going to campus or away from campus. I mean, it's super unclear what they're talking about, but they're saying that this kid walks with a limp because he's hiding a rifle in his jeans. There is no way you're hiding, a Mauser 30-06 in your tight jeans and then you're still bending your knees. Even if he is even if he is limping a little bit. So they're claiming that this is the kid, these various different. So they haven't really been able to explain this part totally clearly. Like, how is he wearing the maroon and then he's wearing the black? How did he get the gun? And they're like, well, and then there's this, right? This is him allegedly running, wearing the dark clothing. We don't really see the gun. Some people say they do see the gun. They think that he's the
Revolutionary salute to my brother at BLACK. Money sign for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Brother say rest in peace to your pops. The revolution must continue. If this was slave time, we'd be plotting with the runaways. Absolutely. I appreciate the love, family. Long live my pops. Revolution is a way of life. Absolutely appreciate the love, family. Salute.
The clothing or the blanket or whatever he's holding is the gun. And I guess they're saying that he shoved this Mauser 30-06 into his pants. Remember, these are the jeans that they're claiming he shoved a rifle in. I mean, look at this. Can you shove a rifle in those jeans? No, you cannot shove a rifle in those jeans. In fact, you wouldn't even be able to conceal a smaller weapon in those jeans without there being some kind of an imprint of the weapon. If you're going to do like conceal carry, they recommend really baggy pants. And that's for just a handgun. And these are like fairly tight jeans. These are not loose fitting jeans. These are not baggy cargo pants. And they're claiming that this is what he chose to wear, hiding a freaking rifle. I mean, these things are just not quite adding up. And then the saying, oh, he changed on the roof and then changed again. So, okay, if he changed on the roof, then explain to me how he got the gun on the roof, because he was wearing this maroon outfit, shorts, and a shirt. And then they said, well, they didn't say, people speculated because they couldn't figure this out. So people online, no one officially has said this, but there was some speculation that, well, he disassembled the rifle and put it in his backpack. You can't disassemble a Mauser 30-06 that easily. I mean, there's some experts that say, well, you can modify them and whatever, but I don't think the rifle that they ultimately found was actually modified. I mean, then they find it in the woods, and this is the full rifle. So there's kind of there's been this mixture of stories of, but the biggest question is, how did he get the damn rifle on the roof, and how did he get it off the roof and in the woods? And then you're saying that there was this note that claimed that the rifle, that he said, well, the rifle's at a drop point in the woods, but now the note doesn't exist. It's been destroyed. And the only reason why you know anything on that note is because you've aggressively interviewed somebody. And Tyler still has not confessed to this crime. He's saying he's not cooperating, right? Also, eyewitnesses claim that the shooter was dressed in all black, wearing a mask and a helmet or body armor. Let's listen to the police calls.
By the Soundson reported one individual that was shot, unknown where the shooter went. And let's be advised, UVU in Orem has had an active shooter at the Charlie Kirk event. We're getting several calls. We're trying to get more information. Gunshots heard near the library at UVU. They're trying to lock the library down now. Still gathering. Just maybe the CS building is just east of the library. He's wearing jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle.
Jeans. What was that she says? He's wearing jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle. Okay.
Jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle. Is on top of the building on the far north side, just east of the library, wearing jeans, black shirt, black vest.
Into UVU. There was one shot. We are staging at the front of the school by the roundabout.
We do have officers following the victim to Timothy Hospital. 418 copy. How many injured do we have? It's just one person.
Okay. So a bit of the conflicting on what the shooter was wearing, black mask or something. I mean, things are chaotic, so I can kind of understand people reporting things not exactly correctly. Okay, let's move on to some other stuff that people are citing on this. The thought the other thing is that this was a very clean shot, clearly done by a professional. Now, some are saying, no, that's not the case, because actually what happened was the shooter missed because he's not a great shot, and it actually hit body armor and then ricocheted. And unfortunately, the body armor did its job, and then the bullet ricocheted and hit Charlie in the neck. However, the police have confirmed there was no body armor. I've showed you the last time we did this show that Charlie when he was being carried out, you could see his skin. He wasn't wearing a vest of any kind. There have been other experts that have come forward saying, well, you could wear just like a breastplate that's really kind of thin and it just kind of covers the sternum area, I suppose, which is why there's so many shots of Charlie Kirk and his t-shirt. You could see his nipples through his t-shirt. So people were saying, well, he wasn't wearing a vest underneath because you could see his nipples. And then some experts are saying, well, there's smaller breastplates that you could wear. But the police have confirmed to Brian Enton of News Nation that there was that he was not wearing armor of any kind.
One of my friends was asking me, did Charlie Kirk wear a bulletproof vest? And so I asked the sheriff that, which isn't part of this interview about Tipsy, but he told me that Charlie Kirk was not wearing a bulletproof vest. And I'm not sure it would have mattered anyway, since it seems like he was shot in the neck. But that is something that I confirmed, that he wasn't wearing a bulletproof. One of my friends was asking me,
so he wasn't wearing any sort of bulletproof vest or bulletproof anything. And that's what's consistent with the images that we've seen, him wearing his t-shirt. You can see his back. There's no outline of any sort of breastplate or any sort of vest. So that means, and the reason why that matters is because that means that this is one shot, one very good shot, and likely not done by an amateur in these sort of high adrenaline situations. And so again, to think that this kid who changed and there was a note, there's not a note, he did confess, he didn't confess, right? Like none of this stuff is really adding up. Okay, let's talk about possible other shooters. This is an image that people believe this is the bullet, that when they slow-moed it down, that the bullet is coming from Charlie's right. And that matters because of where the shooter was located would have come from slightly different angle. I think, let's just look at this again. So this is the sequence. It's coming from Charlie's right. So that would be from his right, then hitting his left. There's also questions on why his shirt would move if it didn't hit him in the chest first. That's why people thought there was maybe a breastplate or something, and they think that they can see an outline there, but the police have confirmed he wasn't wearing one. So something else has to explain the actual, like why all that would happen. Okay. This is the overview. This is the map. Let me pull this full screen for you. So this is where the shooter allegedly was. Let me get rid of this lower third so you can really see it. So Charlie is down there in that lower left corner, kind of over by my logo. That's where he would have been. And the shooter was at where that line, the white, at the other side of the white line. And that means that the bullet would have come from directly ahead and maybe even to his left, directly ahead to his left. But this is from the side and to the right is where this bullet was from the side and to the right, not directly ahead. We would see the bullet in front of Charlie, not off to the side behind him. So some people believe that the main shot we saw was actually an exit wound and not, that when we saw the blood coming out of the left side of his neck, that was actually an exit wound would have been a smaller weapon, because an exit wound with a Mauser 30-06 would be devastating. This is a high velocity round. Depending on the type of round that they used, could have really blown out his neck. We would have maybe seen much more damage. Now, the theory is that if the gunman was in front of Charlie and shot, that maybe what we saw was an entry wound and that the back of his neck would have been blown out by the round, depending on what type of round it was, would have done maybe really significant damage, and it would have been really gruesome and devastating and pretty much like fatal right away. But others are saying they think actually that, this is showcasing the bullet coming in from the right, maybe entering and exiting, and maybe that's why we also see the shirt fly up, that perhaps there was another bullet. We'd have to wait for the autopsy report on that. But the point of this being the bullet coming from a different angle. So that would point to a different shooter, right? Let me show you this.
This is the person that shot Charlie right here with the white.
Okay, this is Solomon Salamandran. I don't know. He's a big YouTuber, a gamer, I believe, and he's got a pretty big channel on YouTube. He put this video out. He was saying, "Go ahead and crop him out," but I didn't. He's in. So he put this video together showing that there could have been the shooter to the right of Charlie standing there, and it looked like even the cell phone was actually a weapon, and the cell phone was a gun. And he actually shows this video, and it's, I mean, you know, it's certainly something to keep in mind. So let me show you his video here.
With the white t-shirt and what seems to be a cell phone and perhaps keys on his hands. This explains also why he went sideways when he got shot. He wasn't shot from a long distance. If he was a high-powered rifle, which, by the way, that's what the FBI is telling everyone. And when the FBI tells you something, guess what? That's not the truth. So that means they're involved in this. That's why when people were like, you should share this with those people. I'm not. This is the first thing I want to share with you guys. This guy in white and that woman that's next to him, those two people are involved and they have something to do. Like, they're both related. They're definitely doing it. And I'm going to show you when he shoots that thing. So this right here, it says a hidden gun. This is from 9 years ago. American company creates lethal weapon in the form of a smartphone. Okay? This is what the dude is using. This is why, and he's got a silencer too. This is why no one understands that it's this dude, all right? Telling everybody that it's a high-powered bolt-action rifle. If it was a high-powered rifle, dude, that dude would have had a massive hole in his neck. Massive. Anyone that hunts or anyone that shot anything from a long distance with a big rifle knows what I'm saying. And also, the FBI never tells you the truth. I don't know if you guys know this. The FBI doesn't work for you. So that dude right next to the girl, you guys see them, right? Right here. That dude is the one that shoots, and this is the girl that's with him. Now, there's two people here on the actual inside of Charlie's security, and those two people are giving signs to others. And a lot of people think those are the people who shot. Nah, it was this dude right here, and this woman's with him as an accomplice. And you're gonna see why when you see the video. He shot from this side. This dude is what shoots him. And that's why the hole goes like this and Charlie goes like this. And it's not a high-powered rifle. It's a shot from a close distance. This thing has it looks like a phone. But what I'm guessing too, because it's crazy when you see the dude shooting, and I'm going to show you the videos right now. When you see the dude shooting the thing, there's no way a person with just a gun can shoot like so. And by the way, he misses at first. There's no way a person that's there can just aim without looking through anything and just like get it perfectly done. I'm pretty sure that phone has a screen that is showing where exactly to shoot. So the bullet came, again, this woman and this guy. These are the two people giving the signs, the ones that everyone, right here. These are this guy and then the guy next to him and then this guy that's giving his back. These people are giving signs to that person, and you'll see it on the video. This is the person that shoots, and it shoots this way, and the bullet, what you're seeing, it's coming out of his neck. Now, in here, everyone is using this video to blame these guys and this guy. This guy, look at him and look at this woman. That's the one that gets the shot done, okay? I'm going to make myself even smaller so that you can see more. I'm going to play it. And
so do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Puts it down.
Too many.
Then he brings it up again. He talks to someone. He gets a signal. He's going to pull out the phone again. And I'm sorry, you're going to have to see this. So
do you know how
it's going to be horrible. There you go. That's your sign. Go again.
Over the last 10 years. Counting or not counting gang violence.
What? You see how he... Did you guys see that? He tried at first and missed. Watch these hands.
Violence.
Great.
That. Watch him again.
10 years.
Counting or not counting gang violence.
Boom, boom, misses. Then he gets him. And you see how he reacts when he gets him too. Like he jumps. When he finally gets him, he jumps. Look at him.
Not counting gang violence.
He missed it. Shot.
I'm gonna give you this credit. You know how
They're
many
there.
shooters there have been in
Those
America
dudes are making the
over
signs. They're trying to make it look like this is him.
10 years.
Counting or not counting gang violence.
Great.
You see how you guys see the trajectory of the bullet, right?
Gang violence.
Side, boom.
Counting
No one
or
has
not
an idea.
counting gang
Dude's on his
violence.
phone.
Great.
See? Look at how close this woman is. And we don't see. She's behind these bars, just like next to those guys. The guy is somewhere around there with that woman. Somewhere around here. If you guys have footage of this side of the thing, there's the two people that did it.
Okay, so I hope you could see that the hands of this shooter, clearly he makes this kind of, let me see if I can, looks, his hands go up, and then he actually does this really strange motion with his hands where he kind of does this and that's why Salamandran, I guess is his name, says that he missed, maybe he missed, or maybe it didn't miss, but maybe the weapon didn't fire the first time around. He thought it did and it just didn't. That happens. So that's one of the theories, is that guy actually was holding some sort of a makeshift weapon. Of course, it might not be that guy at all. It could be somebody from that angle somewhere else that shoots. But the bullet, from a lot of the images that we see, it seems to come from that side and not directly in front, the way that they're claiming Tyler Robinson from where he was perched on the roof, where he would be. Also, there's another video here of a possible weapon that maybe did this, a drone. And this is kind of interesting to see. So this is drone footage. They have it really fast, but they're going to slow it down. Look at that drone that flies by. It's a bit weird. I mean, I don't know. That could be AI. Somebody could be spoofing it, putting stuff online and making stuff up. But I wanted to show you because it's a theory. And in fact, others have said that there was a drone also that flew by very quickly. This is a very, very fast moving drone. Let me just restart it so you can see how fast it went. You couldn't even see it go through this. The first, you're not going to be able to see this. It's really, really fast. And then the video, they slow it down for you so you can really see it. But in the beginning, it's just flying by. Okay, so that is a theory. What about this drone? This drone also allegedly, again, this could be AI makeshift, somebody bullshitting us. But here's Butler, Pennsylvania. A drone also. They'll slow it down for you. Okay, let's find out. Who does this incredibly fast drone belong to? Let me make it full screen for you. There's the drone, allegedly. I don't know. It's just another theory. Something to keep in mind as people are, but this could be somebody's AI makeshift, putting it together to kind of, make it like, wow, it was maybe this fast moving drone that came by. But, possibly. I mean, a lot of people are pointing at the state of Israel, thinking, many of us are suspicious of the state of Israel for a lot of good reason. And if that's the case, they do have really high tech stuff. They've got some of the best technology in the world. They would be able to maybe have these types of drones that move really, really fast and could potentially scare somebody or assassinate somebody in order to get their agenda or whatever it is, right? Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Let me see what this is here. Here's another potential shooter that people are pointing out online. There's this guy here running from the crowd. Looks like he's holding a gun, got a brown shirt on, running away. And so people are like, what about this guy? Another explanation about this guy could be, some people have, especially in Utah, concealed carry. And so if you hear, if you're the type of person that has a gun on you and you hear a gunshot, you might pull your weapon. So it could be that this person was, because he was coming from potentially that direction, could be a shooter, or it could be just somebody that knee-jerk reaction pulled their own weapon because they heard gunshots. Then there's the private jet. There was a private jet that took off shortly after Charlie Kirk was killed. The private jet left Orem, Utah, flew down to Arizona, and it didn't have its the radar, or I guess the transponder was on, but it was something else. They didn't have the public information. So it kept itself kind of stealth. So it just kind of disappeared. It showed up on the, when people track flights, and disappears. And then it kind of shows up again later. The owner of this flight is Derek Maxfield, and he claims that he is a software developer by training, founded Unique in 2012. He's the first direct sales company to operate exclusively through the use of social media. Anyway, Derek Maxfield owns this private jet, and he is also a donor to, I don't think he's Jewish, but he's been a donor to some Jewish organizations in Utah. So people have been pointing at him saying, what did this guy have to do with it? Why did this jet take off shortly after Charlie Kirk's assassination, and the jet kind of disappears? The owner, Derek Maxfield, says that, it was empty. There was only 2 pilots on board. It flew to Arizona. It picked up 7 people, including me. And then it flew back to Orem, Utah. And that's what it was doing. But, you take his word for it. I suppose somebody could have been on that plane. Theoretically, another passenger, they claimed that there was no passengers on board. But would they announce it if the assassin was on board? Would they tell you, well, yeah, we were carrying the assassin away and we took him to Arizona and dropped him off. And, that's what we did. Of course not. So it's suspicious that there was this flight that just happened to take off shortly after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and it flies stealthily somewhere. It could have made a stop. It could have just gone straight on to Arizona and claimed it had no passengers. It's just one of those things that's adding to the mystery. Here's another thing adding to the mystery is this missing camera. There was a camera that was placed directly behind Charlie. And so people are wondering, where's the footage from this camera? Because in later shots, the camera's gone. When you look at later footage, the camera's missing. So people are saying, okay, this camera was there, and now the camera's gone. They took it down, but where's the footage from that camera? Now, I would think law enforcement has that, and we're probably not going to see that. Now there's the theories, of course. Now, many of you are saying, but Kim, it was just the wacky it's just the trans people, the violent trans people. This is some sort of a trans death cult, and he's got a trans lover named Luna. This is Lance, who's transitioning to Luna, supposedly, and is apparently Tyler's lover. And so clearly, it was just another act of violence from the trans death cult. Could be true, sure. I suppose that would be convenient. And if I were staging somebody, if I were an assassin, a professional, an actual real assassin, and I needed to pin this on a patsy, the simplest one for all of especially the right, is to pin it on somebody trans, because I know you're going to go rabid for that, and you're not going to look any other way, because that's the only thing you want to see. And so it's going to be so easy to just pin it on the trans death cult that we're going to claim is there. And we're going to plant all kinds of evidence to make it look like there's this trans death cult. And it's so simple to just gaslight you into believing that. That's why you have to stop and say, okay, maybe there's more to this story, because a lot of it is not adding up. A lot of it on this kid and saying he was hiding a gun in his pants. What pants? He was wearing shorts. Oh no, but then he changed and he was wearing pants, and he was hiding a gun, a rifle in those pants. Not just any gun, a rifle, a big rifle. These things are not making sense. And so as long as they don't make sense, we should be absolutely asking questions. Are they just pinning it on a patsy? And I don't care if you like the patsy. I don't care if you hate the patsy. I don't care if you think, yeah, but Kim, this is we got a problem with the trans death cult in America. Okay, maybe that's true. But if the guy's a patsy, that's not okay. It doesn't matter what group he comes from. I don't care if he's actually a tried and true, sworn in neo-Nazi living in the, Nazi cults in Northern Idaho, whatever, it doesn't matter but a patsy's a patsy. And I don't want to see anybody, I don't care how evil they are, have a crime pinned on them that they actually didn't do. And I think that should be, but they know that if you want that person to be the guilty person, it's a whole lot easier if we could just make it somebody you want to see go down, somebody you want to believe did it. It's a whole lot easier. It's a whole lot easier. Benny Johnson tweeted this out saying that he spoke to law enforcement and they're not convinced that Tyler was a lone shooter, that they are interviewing and talking to others. And so Benny says, just spoke to top FBI officials who made it very clear that they have not ruled out co-conspirators in Charlie Kirk's assassination. That assumption is premature. This is the quote. That assumption is premature. This investigation is just beginning. An enormous amount of evidence has been seized, both digital and physical. FBI sources assure me the public will know everything about the dark internet history, chats, and affiliations of Kirk's left-wing political assassin. The source then alluded to some online groups attempting to delete or destroy evidence. We have everything. We are focused on the radicalization element. They said the truth will not be hidden or buried or classified. The public will know. Oh, sure. Likely story. And by the way, digital is really easy to manipulate. We've seen that. It's easy to, I'm sure if you especially have high-powered friends and high-powered places and you have a lot of resources, that you'd be able to just plant evidence and make it back and backdate it to look like it happened a couple of weeks ago. I mean, you could create an entire fake world, or you could even do it in advance, knowing that you're going to be pulling this thing off and you're going to be pinning it on the trans death cult. And so you better come up with, you better start putting stuff out there. And this is where it gets really strange, because they're claiming that there was all this prior knowledge. And this is when I want to show you how this just is a bit strange. We haven't seen this kind of stuff before, but it's feeding into this, oh, it's a trans death cult type thing. They're digging up these posts of people basically seeming like they knew Charlie was going to be assassinated. Like this was some plot with, like I said, some trans death cult. So here's one from this Omar person. Charlie Kirk is coming to my college tomorrow. I really hope someone evaporates him literally. And then the next tweet, let's just say something big will happen tomorrow. So like as if he knew. And then here's Osama bin Tezuka, like as if these names, like think of these names. I mean, this first one, for one, they could have just pinned this on anybody. I mean, this is the type of stuff you would develop if you were the professional assassins. I mean, look at the names of these people. So you could have gone, now, if the state of Israel did this, if it was Mossad, if it was professional assassins or even just pro-Israel assassins, you'd want to make it look like maybe Arabs did it, because then you could blame the people you want to blame, right? Or you can make it look like the trans death cult. And they've kind of gone both ways on this, because look, this person's Omar. So Omar is saying Charlie Kirk's coming to my college and let's just say something big will happen tomorrow. So that's not absolutely a trans person. The name's Omar. You could claim they're trans later if you needed to, if it's convenient. But right now, I mean, you got an Arab. And then you've got Osama bin Tezuku. I mean, hello, could this be more staged? And this person is saying, 5 days ago posting, you guys, I have something big coming soon, just to be sure. Check the news. You'll know it when you see it. And then the person retweeted their own tweet from 5 days earlier, from the 5th of September, and now saying, well, that's that. Another chud bites the dust. Osama bin Tezuka. This looks like they were actually trying to plant this on Arabs. They were going to go in that direction. But then the right decided, no, this is the trans death cult. And so now they're having to go in that direction. And they're like, okay, switch everything out, make it a trans death cult, because that's the direction these guys want to go in. When we could have just blamed it on terrorism, radical Islamic terror. Here's another one. Altulage saying September 10th will be a very interesting day, posting this on August 6th. And then this book gets posted real quickly from some Anastasia Casey. This was apparently published the day before Charlie Kirk's death, The Shooting of Charlie Kirk by Anastasia Casey. Obviously a pseudonym or whatever. This was then taken down from Amazon. So, a lot of weird stuff that I've never seen before. Now looking at, so that's the stuff that they're putting out there, and then they're saying it's the trans death cult. Last week we talked about the gray zone, Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil coming out saying that they had a source who was close to Charlie Kirk, who said that Charlie Kirk was worried about he was getting a lot of pressure from the pro-Israel group, and he was worried about it. Harrison Smith from InfoWars says he got the same information, but from a different source. He was able to confirm with Max and Anya that his source was different than their source. But that's a second person who's come out saying that Charlie Kirk was receiving threats, that he was worried about the pro-Israel group. And then we get this weird article that comes out from the New York Post. And Charlie Kirk and Rabbi Pal talked hours before his death. He was in a combative mood, they said. Charlie Kirk was in high spirits and in a combative mood. I don't know what that means. How can you be in a high spirits and a combative mood? Just before kicking off his American comeback tour at Utah Valley University, said a rabbi friend who spoke to him for an hour the night before his death. Rabbi Pesach Waliki, 55, an American-born cleric who lives in Israel, met with Kirk via Zoom on Tuesday night. Quote, he was excited to get back out on campus tour, said Waliki, who said he often spoke to Kirk before public appearances to advise him on how to defend Israel effectively. If that's not suspicious, I don't know what is. So, they're saying, oh, yeah, no, we're friends. Charlie's been a friend of Israel. In fact, he spoke to a rabbi for an hour the night before. Yeah, so we're just taking your word for it that you guys were just in cahoots about how he could properly and effectively defend Israel. Or maybe you had the conversation with how he could properly defend Israel, and he's sitting there like, don't tell me what to say. I don't want to be told this. I'm going to do what I want. And, next thing you know, he could not do what he wanted to do. This guy, who's also pro-Israel guy, Josh Hammer, says he was there. He was in that meeting. So he's like, I was also part of this meeting the night before the assassination. Those maliciously claiming Charlie was heading in a Fuentes direction on this issue have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So again, trying to claim, no, Charlie Kirk was pro-Israel. If he was so pro-Israel, why were you having an hour-long conversation with him before his death, telling him how to effectively defend Israel? Don't you think he was effectively defending Israel? Why would you need to have an hour-long conversation about it? Charlie Kirk was very bright, so he wouldn't need your advice on how to properly defend Israel if he was properly defending Israel in a way that you found efficient. So adding to the suspicion. So that, these are, just wanted to share with you all of what's out there right now. It's inconsistent. They're still not painting a story that makes sense. I think a lot of us are looking at this saying, this is just a lot of fumbling and bumbling going around. And, there's probably a lot of the law enforcement and FBI, they feel a lot of pressure to come up with somebody. They've got somebody and they're just going in that direction. And now people are rabid at the mouth thinking about, they're foaming at the mouth, rabid about the trans death cult angle. And so they're going in that direction. But those initial tweets that were coming out that they were kind of digging, those look planted, like they were going to put it on Arabs first. And then now pivot, switch. And now we're going to put it on the trans death cult because that's the direction people want. And I think we should all be really suspicious. And a lot of people that are out there, they're just automatically, especially on the right, which is really concerning, all just out there knee-jerk reaction is trust the government. No, I'm sorry. I'm not going to trust the government. I'm not going to trust the government. I'm not going to trust their narratives. I'm not going to trust that when there is a powerful leader of movements that gets assassinated, I'm not going to just automatically believe it was just some lone 22-year-old gunman who had a trans boyfriend. And that's why, and he just happened to take a perfect kill shot, and happened to stuff a Mauser 30-06 in his tight jeans he wasn't even wearing. Actually, he was wearing gray shorts. I mean, none of this is making sense. We should all be asking more questions. We should be holding them accountable, law enforcement accountable. We should force them to make the story make sense. And right now, the story's not making sense. So everybody else that's out there, the big conspiracy theorists, those of us that are challenging these narratives and saying, hey, there was one group that had a motive. You have to ask for the motive. What is the motive? And they say, well, the trans death cult, they just hated Charlie Kirk because he was a Christian and he was, whatever. I guess you could establish that motive. You could pin it on a lot of people when it comes to any of us political talkers. But there was one group that benefited the most on this. And one group has the sophistication, the resources, the ability to pull something like this off, and the ability to pin it on whoever they want, and the ability to basically gaslight or force or intimidate our law officials to go along with their narrative that they have established for us. And they have the ability to manipulate data online. When they say we're gathering a mountain of digital data, I don't trust your digital data, just like I don't trust your AI generated image of the perpetrator. You shouldn't be using any of that stuff. So ask questions, stay skeptical of this. The story is not adding up as much as people want it to. It just simply isn't. And that's really just stay skeptical. Stay skeptical.
there's no coming back from watching Charlie Kirk slowly uncork his true feelings about Israel. If those are his true feelings, that would have destroyed the American support for Israel. That would have entirely alienated the entire right wing under 25. Until we feel conclusive evidence, which is not likely to even really ever happen for most of us, we should be asking questions and seeking the truth.
Ian Carroll recently weighed evidence that Israel ordered the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And in this clip, he goes piece by piece of various pieces of information that he believes points in that direction. And I have a good idea we're going to agree and disagree with parts of this, but also I want to make it clear that it is appropriate to seek the truth and to ask questions and to question the original narrative that the government gives, as long as you are actually pursuing truth and justice for the victims, and not because you just have a particular political agenda or axe to grind. So let's get into it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
So the Israel thing, we're going to unpack that a little first. It's not the only angle we're going to unpack, but it's context that kind of comes before the day of the shooting. So Charlie Kirk is kind of the caricature of the right-wing Zionist influencer. And he built the most massive, influential, impressive platform in Turning Point USA, largely on Zionist monetary backing, but also on blood, sweat, tears, hard work. Like, there's no understating how absolutely impressive Turning Point is as an organization and how impactful it is. And I was saying this to my friend the other day that even if you're not on the right, even if you don't agree with Charlie's opinions and perspectives, I would hope that all sane, moderate people in our nation right now would understand that we want young people involved in politics, and we want young people thinking critically about their future and about the nation. And probably no one has done more for the youth getting engaged in politics than Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I agree with all this, especially on the conservative side. If you ask me, who are the top conservative influencers, Charlie was top 3, if you ask me. I think only maybe Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson were bigger names in impacting and moving society in the direction of the right. You could maybe say Jack Posobiec or Benny Johnson. There's a few others in the mix there, but I think he was that prominent and that influential, especially when it came to engaging young people. And this is just apparent. I believe he really is one of the top conservative influencers in the United States. So this is a big deal. His assassination is a big deal. He was a very prominent personality in that world, and you can say that whether you agree with them or disagree with them.
And the power of Turning Point and Charlie's platform as an influence, especially over young conservative people in America, cannot be understated. Like, it cannot.
Agreed.
And so when the Zionists that backed him all the way, that built Turning Point USA underneath him and around him with their money, when they start to hear things like Charlie Kirk saying, "Oh, you guys probably aren't going to have audio from the screen because I'm not sharing tabs. You're going to have to deal with it. You don't need the audio on these things for the most part. You kind of do need the audio. Fuck." So Charlie Kirk was saying we should release all the Epstein files, right? But that's not it. I'm sure that you guys have seen his interview with Megyn Kelly, where he opens with the words, "I'm terrified." And then they go back and forth talking about how they have received some real pushback from sort of the donor class, that, like, it just feels sketchy. And Harrison, this is the video that Harrison was referring to in this kind of original tweet and conversation. He did a really great stream on InfoWars about it. He was referring to this conversation between Charlie and Megyn, where they were kind of going back and forth, and they just felt scared. It felt weird and sketchy.
All right, so it's important to note he never said in that interview with Megyn Kelly, and I went back and looked at it because some of my commenters recommended me to do it, that he was scared for his life from the direction of Israel. That allegation comes from unnamed sources that I believe Harrison Smith put forward and said, something like a tweet maybe about a month ago that something like, I'm not going to name names, but Charlie Kirk told me that he's afraid that if he betrays Israel, he's going to be killed. That's not part of that video. I just want to be clear about that, provide clarification, because that's a narrative out there right now. But I don't know that that's substantiated by Charlie himself. Now, I'm not saying that can't be true no matter what, but there's no film of Charlie saying that. And when he had that clip about him asking for the release of the Epstein files, there's no more mainstream talking point than that from the right. And it's been that way for 5 years. Even people influential bucked Trump on this, pushed back against Trump when Trump covered up the Epstein files and refused to release them and made up a farcical narrative about how it's a Democratic hoax and it's boring. And hey, look at this grand jury testimony. No, don't look there. Here's an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell where we don't push back. All of that mainstream talking point. In no part does he say that, Epstein was working for Mossad. He never asserts that in any footage I can see or questions Israel's culpability in influencing Epstein, which we've talked about a lot here. I buy generally the narrative that that's the most plausible scenario, that Israel had Epstein as an asset, but I haven't seen that from Charlie.
He was talking about really highly intellectual critiques of Jewish donors in the American left funding cultural Marxism and things that degrade American values. And he was totally not shy about talking about it. This is more recent clip, but he, with his knowledge and political expertise, if this man starts criticizing Israel in an earnest way, in an unfiltered way, he has the wherewithal and the political understanding to really open some cans of worms. And
that part I agree with. The last part he said, but in the clip he's showing here, and I've seen this clip too, Charlie Kirk complains that Jewish American donors are influencing anti-Christian schemes that do those things, that support cultural Marxism, etc., that Ian just said. But at no point, again, does he complain about Israel, causing that financially and bankrolling that financially. He's saying Jewish Americans, and that's a little bit different than saying Israel has financed that. And, getting in trouble with Israel for, exposing the proclivities of many Jewish American donors, especially those of us that don't conflate Israel and Judaism in general and Jewish donors. And yeah, you can say, there are a lot of Jewish donors that donate to pro-Israel causes and causes connected with Israel, but it's certainly not the same to say that Charlie Kirk complained about Israel financing those sorts of things in the United States. That's not in the clip at all. And I do think that's an important difference to distinguish here. Just want to note it, but I think that there is a mistake in Ian if he conflates the two there.
I really don't think you can understate how dangerous that would be to Israel if he were to start criticizing them openly.
Agree with that. That I agree with. I just haven't seen much evidence that he has openly criticized Israel. Openly. Not much at all, actually. He was a diehard Zionist. The conservative movement in general has been moving away from, absolute support for Israel. You can see this in people like Megyn Kelly that are starting to have, Marjorie Taylor Greene on the show talking about this a little bit. Steve Bannon, Candace and Tucker moved away from, unmitigated support for Israel a long time. But that's where the headwinds are going regardless of this happening. But I haven't seen much from Charlie saying that. I've seen a lot of people alleging that, but a lot of these clips to me don't really portray that.
Who's starting all the wars? He was talking about it. Very real segment about war with Iran and just being not about it and talking about how it's good for Israel. It's not good for us.
That is true. Apparently he had a personal conversation with Trump urging him not to enact regime change in Iran and maybe not even to bomb Iran. I think stories differ there. But again, I don't think that that's condemning Israel. That was looking out for U.S. foreign policy interests. I know that conflicted with what Israel wanted, certainly so. But in no part did he say, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu's a monster. There's a genocide in Gaza. You know, this Israel first mentality is toxic. I've never seen anything like that from him. Talking Trump out of bombing Iran is not necessarily just, you know, going against Israel. It was to an extent, but he's never openly criticized Israel. And a lot of people that were generally pro-Israel in the United States and the Trump coalition were against that bombing, by the way, were otherwise pretty pro-Israel. So that's another thing.
Must be a redo of the same conversation. Quote, Jewish donors have been the #1 funding mechanism of radical open borders, neoliberal, quasi-Marxist policies. Like, that is literally like a Groyper Nazi talking point when people want to smear that topic and don't want to talk about it.
That is true. People don't want to talk about that, but at no point is that Israel. He's talking about Jewish donors in the United States. It's not the same as, you know, talking about Israel and what Israel finances domestically in the United States.
And it's like, I didn't know that Charlie was talking about these things. I wasn't watching Charlie's streams. I was just characterizing him and kind of talking shit on Twitter, kind of like a dumbass. And I wasn't actually paying attention to the words he was saying. And he, when you actually go back and look, he was clearly changing his perspective. And on Epstein, like, quote, this is no longer just speculation. First of all, the evidence that shows that Epstein was a creation of either Mossad, Israeli intelligence, American intelligence, etc. He was going in on the obvious fact that Jeffrey Epstein was a creation of Israel. And
interesting. This clip I haven't seen, and I'll admit this is compelling if he actually does even flirt with the notion that Epstein was a product of Mossad, Israeli intelligence, or American intelligence. That points more toward, you know, contempt for Israel, or at least floating the possibility that Israel had this guy by the strings and was conducting an operation through him. This is something I'll have to consider. I'm going to take a look at this video and make sure it aligns with that. I hadn't seen this clip. I had only seen clips of Charlie Kirk talking about how, you know, Epstein might be an intelligence operative, not necessarily Mossad or Israeli. I think that's more compelling if he was starting to talk about that for the first time recently. That's more persuasive to me. I'll admit that right off the bat. I'm going to look into this.
Worked for Israel via Ehud Barak and Ghislaine Maxwell. And so these are very taboo topics in general, but coming from their guy, the one that has built the new American young right-wing coalition with thousands of chapters all across America on college and high school campuses. And then his very last episode is literally a podcast with Ben Shapiro, where he just like straight up says, like, you know, I feel like we should be able to criticize Israel, and like goes into it. And dude, Ben's face is just, it's not good. It's
all right. So I don't agree with that interpretation of this clip, which I've also seen. And again, I urge all my viewers to watch this. In this clip, all Charlie Kirk does is ask Ben Shapiro the question, you know, should we believe everything we're hearing in the media about Israel? Is it proper to question the narratives we're getting about Israel? That's all he says. And hey, maybe that's enough for you to believe and go with the narrative that he's turned against Israel. But to me, it's not. He had to have known, being smart enough, that Ben Shapiro was just going to answer with classic Zionist apologetics. That's what Ben Shapiro specializes in. That wasn't particularly condemning to Israel at all in the clip that I saw here. He was just asking a question, you know, teeing it off for Ben, you know, maybe even thinking that Ben's going to knock it out of the park and be pro-Israel. I just don't have the same interpretation of this one Ian does, and this one isn't compelling to me at all. Again, though, I admit the previous one was, and I'm going to look more into it.
And so that sort of, okay, here's the other Harrison stream. If you're more interested in what Harrison was thinking when he wrote that original tweet and all that, he elaborates in it in this clip from InfoWars, August 7th of 2025. And there's a post that he put up to explain it, although honestly, he doesn't exactly add a lot of context. But so
Revolutionary salute to our Yaya's kids for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Salute to the ancestors for love, wisdom, knowledge, and guidance. Appreciate the love, Queen. RP to my pops.
You know, it kind of builds this narrative, and X did all that. Like, I was not trying to stoke that. I wasn't trying to get in and like blame Israel immediately, although I did, you know, fire off shots this morning, so to speak. But this narrative built on X, largely on its own. Put it all together. Sorry, guys, I forgot how to use the streaming stuff. It's been a long time. And ultimately, like, there's a narrative to put there. It tracks and it comes together.
I wouldn't really say that. I would say there's some circumstantial pieces that people point to. To me, some are more compelling than others. The one I talked about was. A lot of the others are not compelling at all. If you want me to be honest, you know, there was no more, you know, hardcore supporter of Zionism in the United States and on the conservative movement, especially among young people, than Charlie Kirk. I haven't seen major evidence he was turning away. You know, he might have been floating with the tides to some extent, to the like degree that Megyn Kelly has been, you know, asking questions of guests that aren't exactly on the same wavelength of being Ben Shapiro or Mark Levin on Israel, but nothing more than that so far to me.
And then you should start to think about, like, what are the question marks here? Like, what factors make that story actually play? And the real question is, what was Charlie actually saying behind the scenes about Israel? What was he actually being told by his donors and by any Israelis or AIPAC people or, you know, his Zionist funders behind the scenes? How much did they know about his true feelings? How constrained was he feeling? Like, what was really going on back there, right? That's the real question. Basically, the question is, what did this guy that told this to Harrison, what did that guy actually hear? What did he actually know? What's really going on in the background with Charlie Kirk? And today, the Gray Zone published this article, Max Blumenthal and Anya Parampil. Charlie Kirk refused Netanyahu funding offer, was frightened by pro-Israel forces before death, friend reveals. Now, in the article, they do not disclose the identity of their source. And they don't, as far as I saw, disclose whether this is the same source as talked to Harrison. I don't think we know that. But it very much seems to corroborate Harrison's claim. In the weeks leading up to his September 10th assassination, Kirk had come to loathe the Israeli leader, regarding him as a bully, the source said. Kirk was disgusted by what he witnessed inside the Trump administration, where Netanyahu sought to personally dictate the president's personal decisions and weaponize Israeli assets like billionaire donor Miriam Adelson to keep the White House firmly under its thumb. Like, according to Kirk's friend, who also enjoyed access to President Donald Trump in his inner circle, Kirk strongly warned Trump last June against bombing Iran on Israel's behalf. Quote, Charlie was the only person who did that, they said, recalling how Trump barked at him in response and angrily shut down the conversation. The source believes the incident confirmed in Kirk's mind that the president of the United States had fallen under the control of a malign foreign power and was leading his own country into a series of disastrous conflicts. I mean, it's an anonymous source, but like the Gray Zone, they don't fuck around.
Yeah, I agree with them on that. I love the Gray Zone. There's basically no more trustworthy dissident foreign policy enterprise than the Gray Zone. Max Blumenthal's a hero as far as I'm concerned. So is Aaron Mate. But here's what I'll say about this. This is an unnamed source, not saying that means to discard what it says or that it's untruthful. But I hope this unnamed source would tell the same thing to Charlie Kirk's family, for his widow, for the sake of his two young children, that this was the case too, such that it can be investigated, and that this friend shares that information with his family too, so they can get to the bottom of it. You know, whether the authorities care about this, if it's Israel or not, I think we can deduce that, you know, the authorities will sweep it under the rug if it embarrasses Israel in any way. But at the very least, close friends and family should know about this concern, if this is true from this unnamed source. That's what I hope would happen. So this one is more compelling to me than a lot of the other things. I know it's an unnamed source. good journalists protect their sources for obvious reasons, but I hope his family would get to know this too.
Like, I trust them more than the mainstream media for sure.
Agreed.
The following month, Kirk had become the target of a sustained private campaign of intimidation and free-floating fury by wealthy and powerful allies of Netanyahu, figures he described in an interview as Jewish leaders and stakeholders. Quote, he was afraid of them, the source emphasized. At TPUSA, the rift with Israel widened, and it goes on. He had Tucker Carlson and Dave Smith on, and a lot more open conversation, and some really legit shit was said. Some real truth was thrown down. And
that's true. That event had a debate between Dave Smith and Josh Hammer, in which Dave Smith, arguing against aid for Israel, got more pops than Josh Hammer, a Zionist, among young conservatives. Really surprising reaction, if you ask me, and really showing where the headwinds are going in terms of young conservatism. And Tucker Carlson got a lot of applause for saying, hey, it's not anti-Semitism to question the U.S. relationship with Israel or to criticize it. So that's true, too.
That, this is just my opinion, but in my opinion, if that was allowed to continue, if America spent the next year watching Charlie Kirk turn on the present administration in Israel, even if he maintained his sort of greater Zionist stance, and even if he maintained his greater sort of semi-Jewish Christian identity, and I don't mean that as a dig. I mean that as he literally took Sabbath. Anyways, that would have destroyed the American support for Israel. That would have entirely alienated the entire right wing under 25 or so, right? There's no coming back from watching Charlie Kirk slowly uncork his true feelings about Israel, if those are his true feelings, like we just read. And to then watch the fallout, because there's this other thing that happens, is any time that a person that has not been critical of Israel is critical for the first time on the internet, especially if they're Jewish, or especially if they were a supporter of Israel, and they say that first negative thing, and then they experience for the first time the just slander of anti-Semitism, Nazi, you're a bigot, you far right, you crazy extremist, and you are immediately bombarded by the Hasbara propaganda attack machine.
Yeah, I believe this. Candace Owens has attested to this, and I believe her based upon what they did. They even paid preachers to slam her during their congregational services, during their preaching in their churches. They would slam Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. I don't necessarily agree with them that it would have turned all of young conservatism away from this if Charlie Kirk had turned away from this. I agree that it would have been impactful. But then I'll ask the question, why wasn't it impactful when Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens started to go against Israel? Candace Owens really before Tucker to some extent, but both of them for some time. And really the younger conservatives are less likely to support Israel than older conservatives. So wouldn't it even be more important to turn older conservatives away from that? It seems like Candace or Tucker, represent that more. Maybe they're in the process of hitting them too. I hope not. I mean, this level of violence is crazy. It's not worth endorsing, but one has to ask the question, younger conservatives are already turning against Israel. And I don't know that the impact would be as big as Ian thinks necessarily. It would have been impactful. I just don't know the degree.
Suddenly Charlie Kirk is funded by Qatar and all the other allegations get thrown out. It would have just shown it would have been the messiest, most like dumpster fire that you could ever imagine. So I just say all that to say that there is evidence. Dave Smith had legitimate criticisms. I came out very hot. You're right. Not a factual statement at the time. I said, what did I say? At the start of it, it was the internet already figured out who was the most likely culprit.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's true. Even if you're looking at conservative circles before today, one of the prevailing narratives is this is obviously a trans shooter. Obviously. based on, the Crowder release about the etchings on the shell cases, we got a trans shooter on our hands, and doesn't seem to be that turns out to be the truth. If you think the shooter they apprehended is the one, it's the one on the video, which the likeness seems very similar to me. I'm not a forensic analyst, but it doesn't seem like this guy is trans. I'll just say he's not trans, but that was a prevailing narrative too. The Israel narrative too is among dissidents, but I don't know if it was the most likely narrative, even if you were just watching like Twitter in general.
And so there it's not like there was no evidence. It's not like there is no evidence for Israel. And that is not it. That is just circumstantial context. But then we're going to actually get to the shooting and the day of the shooting and what happened. So there is because here's the thing. More context. A political assassination happens. One of the, honestly, Charlie Kirk is a more significant political figure than 95% of Congress, right? In a lot of ways, Charlie Kirk has done more in right-wing politics than basically every politician, except for the core cabinet and the key senators, right? And so this is a extremely high-profile political assassination.
Yeah, I totally agree with him on that. On both points there. This is probably the highest degree political assassination in the US since Martin Luther King. If you can think of another one, let me know. I mean, maybe Bobby Kennedy too. There's a few, but man, he has that kind of influence. I think that you could even argue that he is more influential in the age of digital media and independent media among his circle than maybe even Martin Luther King was. And the civil rights movement was fractured between people like King and people like Stokely Carmichael and Malcolm X and Fred Hampton. There's many characters of that era. Martin Luther King was the biggest one, and his impact was enormous. His influence was enormous. So was Charlie Kirk's. I mean, this is a household name too, maybe a top 3 conservative influencer in the world in an age where there's more populace here too. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one comparison, but this is high profile. He's right about that.
It's not like he was protected by Secret Service or any of that. There's nuance. But in a political assassination of that magnitude, the first question is, who are the suspects? And one large group of suspects that is immediately in question every time there's a political assassination is intelligence agencies from all nations. Obviously.
Yeah.
Unless you were born yesterday, just read a book. If someone shoots at a large political figure, whether that's a media figure, an actual politician, a preacher, whatever, it's not always going to be an intelligence agency, but it damn well could be, right?
Yeah, or at least an organization aided by one. You have, Rafael Trujillo. You have assassination attempts on lots of figures. Soleimani, that one happened a few years ago. You have, assassination attempts on Ayman al-Zawahiri until his assassination. You had bin Laden's assassination. This is true. I mean, you should look to potential state involvement of high-profile people. That's the truth. But I don't know if that proves the Israel connection in this regard. I mean, I'm mostly agree with him. You should ask questions about that, or at least consider that. I don't know if that alone points to that, though, in this case.
And so it's not some crazy harebrained thing to just ask, could this have been a state-sponsored intelligence agency hit job? In this case, you would normally not think to look at Israel, which is Charlie is the biggest Israel supporter ever. But when you understand the circumstances and the context, they immediately become the most likely, in many ways, the only likely intelligence agency that might have had motive. And I would argue that we just talked about a lot of motive.
I don't know about that. I think even if you believe that they had motive, there's a big motive against rolling the dice on killing the most high-profile pro-Zionist young influencer in the country. I'm just going to say it. I do. I think that in an age of digital media where it's harder to hide your footprints, not saying that the deep state doesn't do this, not saying that the CIA and the NSA and the FBI don't do this, nefarious plots, carried out sometimes in conjunction with Mossad, so much to the extent that Mossad and the CIA become indistinguishable to some extent. But I think it's rolling the dice hard that a whistleblower doesn't come out to expose this, a paper trail is left, and that ruining the entire U.S.-Israeli relationship forever. That's not something that I think even the state could cover up if it really gets out. That's thing is something that would destroy this relationship forever. And as we know now, the status quo is they have America by the throat. You know, Mearsheimer says Israel's an albatross around the neck of the United States, and we're tied to the hip of Israel. That's true. That's what they have now. They don't seem to need that much more anymore. And that's despite people like Tucker and Candace moving away from supporting Israel.
Obviously, it's not a thing that they would just do lightly. It's not a thing that depends who's doing it. Because let's be real, Israel has, shall we say, a habit of assassinating people like fucking crazy. And they have a pattern of shooting people in the neck.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. They're especially great at doing that to innocents, to women and children in Gaza by about 100,000 or more at this point, maybe more. He's right about that one.
That does not mean that they did it, but it's not evidence, right? Like, it's not no reason to say such a thing. Okay.
I do think it's reason not to be definitive about it. I'm not saying it's reason that you can never talk about it. That I would never say. I think it's wrong to say you can't talk about this angle or consider it or weigh evidence accordingly. That's what I've been trying to do, call balls and strikes here. But I don't think it's evidence in the way that it's the most likely scenario so far. That could change. You know, presented with more evidence, I might change my view on that.
Let's be clear. So then it was kind of weird when Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted praying for Charlie Kirk at 3:02 p.m. Literally, he tweeted it before President Trump. It was like within a minute or two of the actual shooting. It was like right when it happened.
All right, this one is just not true. And I'm not accusing Ian of lying, but I looked into this one because other people had claimed this elsewhere. But the truth is that, and I'll show you guys here, the truth is that Netanyahu tweeted that he was praying for Charlie Kirk about an hour and 41 minutes after he was actually shot, according to the narrative, according to reports on the ground. And the timestamps are here. And just to double check this, I went back to those tweets and looked at it, and it did match up with what Grok is saying here. I know Grok is fallible. Sometimes it gives the wrong information, but it does seem like this was 1 hour and 41 minutes after he was actually shot, not within a minute or two of when he was shot. So had to correct Ian on that one. I think it's only fair to provide that clarification. And based on time zone differences and stuff, I can see how that could be confused or misinterpreted. So I'm not saying, you know, Ian's doing this for callous reasons, but I do think he's not correct on that one.
As though that's so weird. That's super weird. And he's been super vocal about the whole thing and about how he's like blaming it on like Muslims and jihadists and radicalism. And it's like, dude, Iran didn't shoot Charlie Kirk. Calm down, Benji. Get the fuck out of our country. So like, that's weird. That's just weird, right? And it does not prove anything.
Well, hey, I'm with Ian on that last point. I mean, Iran did not shoot Charlie Kirk, that's for sure. And Benjamin Netanyahu asserting that it could be terrorists is equally implausible as some of the zaniest theories I've heard. But look, I tried to call balls and strikes on this one the best I can. I'm not sold. I'll just say I'm not sold that Charlie Kirk was turning away from Israel in the conventional sense at all. Maybe that could have been true to some extent behind the scenes if this unnamed source was correct. It seems like that's at least plausible. But again, I hope that source tells his family, because that might be the answer to his death. And man, I hope this doesn't become a new JFK. And, 60 years later, we're getting the Charlie Kirk files from the FBI, heavily redacted, of course, heavily redacted. I hope that's not the case. But man, I just don't think this one adds up too much. I just don't. And I'm willing to be open about it. I'm willing to be persuaded otherwise with more information, things I don't have. If you have any, leave it in the comments down below. I'm willing to entertain the notion that we should at least ask these questions for a few reasons. One, I'm not convinced that he was turning against Israel. I think he said some fairly conventional things, even amongst, Zionists that don't exactly, have a problem with asking for the release of the Epstein files. I think Laura Loomer is one of those. I mean, I think she has excuses for the cover up, but she's asked that too. She's one of the most diehard Zionists in the world as well. And there's other examples too, but that's one of them. And then the other thing is I haven't seen any connections that people have made between this shooter and Israel presented at all. In fact, it doesn't seem like there's any connection at all. You can say his dad was a sheriff for a long time. He was in law enforcement for a long time. Looks like he was raised quasi-conservative, whether he turned, more woke or, leftist activist after that. I still think's a quasi-open question, at least based on some stuff online. But I haven't seen any clear-cut connection to Israel that he has. I'm not saying that's not possible, but you have to make that linkage. If you're going to say that the person in that film running off the roof, jumping off the roof, whatever questions you have about if he had the gun or whatever. I've seen it all right now. But you have to make the connection of how he was related to Israel if you're going to go with this narrative, I think. It behooves you to clarify that and not me to just speculate. So that's where I think we are. Balls and strikes here. It doesn't pass or withstand scrutiny to me. I'll admit there were a few things there, including Charlie Kirk talking about a possible Mossad relationship with Epstein that would change my thoughts a little bit. But the amalgam of evidence to me is not indicative of someone that was really turning away from Israel. This was a conventional conservative with conventional views, mostly in support of Israel, that had been, dealt a hand in which conservatives have started to slide away from just complete control and, support for Israel. We have seen that with many people. I think if Charlie engaged in that, it's not out of the norm, unless we're willing to say that Megyn Kelly is going to be the next to be offed. We don't know that. So this is a theory worth discussing. I just don't see it. I think it's implausible. And hey, you can call me a pro Netanyahu stooge if you want, that I'm a, Mossad asset myself for this, despite all the content that I produce that's very incendiary and critical of Israel if you want. But in this case, I'm just not seeing it. I reserve the right to change my opinion, but that's what I think about this. Let me know if you think I'm crazy, but I don't. I do want to hear what you think. Let me know down below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Ian. Great podcast, Ian. Thanks for discussing it honestly, and at least considering this. I think, we can talk about this. This isn't a forbidden subject, no matter what they tell you. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button.
And this is the moment of truth. When it comes to the black media in general, and certainly this channel in specific, I don't talk about religion. But in this case, for this morning's briefing, I don't want to talk about black people and religion, though I do want to talk about the beneficiaries of white privilege and what is clearly their religion. And just for the record, we're not going to be discussing Charlie Kirk for the remainder of this week. In fact, I don't expect to be discussing him after today. But there was an interesting aspect to what happened in the wake of his passing that I do think needs to be commented on. Now, as many of you know, Donald Trump, he couldn't care less about Charlie Kirk, no matter how much of a front he puts up. That doesn't surprise people, but there are some folks who apparently didn't expect it. Now, he could care less about the death of that white woman, Irina Zarutska, just like he could care less about Charlie Kirk's death. A reporter asked Trump in the last couple of days how he was holding up since Kirk got murked, and Trump didn't even bother to respond.
How are you holding up over the last 3.5 years? I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. and it's going to be a beauty. It'll be an absolutely magnificent structure. And I just see all the trucks. We just started, so it'll get done very nicely, and it'll be one of the best anywhere in the world, actually.
He just basically said fine, and after that he immediately went into a rant about how great it was that the ground was being broken on a ballroom for the White House and how great it was going to be when they finally got that built. How different the tone was from the Orange Man for what it had been just 24 hours earlier, that is, before they confirmed the identity of the killer. Yeah, all of that talk about going after these left-wingers. Left-wingers was code for black people. We're going to be finally going after these black people. Oh, except they found out who killed Charlie Kirk. And it's like, oh, on second thought, look at that ballroom that we're building on the White House. You see, for the white supremacists, there are no core principles. All they've got is just situational ethics and moral relativism. Now, another thing I'm sure a lot of you have noticed is there's been a number of individuals and groups who've decided that they're going to be putting up billboards and putting up other sorts of tributes to Charlie Kirk as if they didn't know about Charlie Kirk's decade or so of anti-black remarks, as if they didn't know about his litany of attacks on Dr. King. And yet they're praising this guy. And what that shows you is there's a whole lot of individuals who may not be known to you as being part of the alt-right or the white right. And yet now a lot of them are feeling like, well, we feel like we have to say something. Yeah, they want to go ahead and do their own version of virtue signaling. But Charlie Kirk isn't the only one who's gotten this kind of treatment. He's not the only one who has just been an open, blatant anti-black racist and been able to get all sorts of praise and adulation from the dominant society. Why does that keep happening over and over again? Why is it that in America, a large percentage of the population, particularly those who have deep pockets, can't wait to be the first ones to praise a bunch of slave owners and open bigots and racists and traitors like the Confederacy? Why does that keep happening? Why do they insist on giving sympathy to the devil? Why do they make it a point in this country to take the absolute worst, the scum of the earth, and just go out of their way to put them on a pedestal? What drives them to do that? Because it is literally an article of faith for the white supremacists on the left and the right. They all worship at the same altar. When the statues of those slave owners were getting torn down a few years back, you saw a lot of white Democrats and people on the so-called left who felt personally threatened by seeing that. And why would that be the case? Because they know that their positions in the world were given to them by the exact same white supremacists who gave that to their Republican and right-wing counterparts. They all depend on the exact same system of goodies, giveaways, and guarantees for their place in the world. What we are up against is a religion, no different than when these white authorities talk about so-called radical Islam, except this religion already controls the world, and we're fighting to break its grip before it kills us all. We're up against a suicide cult. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, if they cannot rule the world, then they'll destroy it. And that's exactly what they're doing. All right, but what does that have to do with the insistence by those in the dominant society to put bigots and racists and all of these horrible people on a pedestal? What does that have to do with that? Well, in Catholicism, the Catholics have saints. These are righteous people who the Catholic Church authorizes believers to pray to because these people were said to have embodied a particular virtue or principle. So Christians, at least under Catholicism, will have specific saints that they pray to. And when you see the dominant society putting these bigots and racists on a pedestal, especially when they have a history of doing all sorts of vile and foul stuff, what you're seeing is the ethno-political equivalent of the exact same practice. They're not ignoring the evil that these individuals have done. They're in fact celebrating it. What they're doing is they're praying to and appealing to these satanic entities, and they're hoping to become as evil as they are. Whenever you see some slave owner who's being praised by the white powers that be, that's a form of worship. There's a very strong and perverted element of spirituality, quote unquote, that goes from the dominant society when it comes to these individuals that it chooses to focus its adoration towards. You see, what they're doing is they're worshiping them. They have demonic entities that they pray to. That's what it is. Whenever they have somebody who they know is evil as hell, committed all of these vile acts, and they decide that they want the society to see them praising and worshiping and giving all sorts of honors to these individuals, what do you think they're doing? These are individuals who are lionizing slave owners and, more recently, ruthless racists. White supremacy is heavily steeped in the practice of the occult, and appealing to arcane forces in order to get their way. You see this among people from George Washington to Thomas Jefferson to George Patton. Remember, no matter what lies the white right may want you to believe, the founders of the United States were not theists. They were deists. They believed in spiritual forces, but they were not Christians. All that Masonic stuff they were doing wasn't from out of the Bible. These were evil individuals we're talking about here, then and now. When the Bible says we wrestle not with flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, against the rulers of this world, what do you think that means? We're up against pure evil, and white supremacy is the worldly codification of that evil. The dominant society sold their souls, if they can be called that, for what few little goodies, giveaways, and guarantees the white supremacy offered them. And in exchange, they gladly support the satanic forces that undergird white supremacy. They worship the demonic entities like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. All of their heroes are just a litany of demons. That's what we're seeing here. This is demon worship. The Bible lists demons and demonic entities by name. And the Satanists also have demons and spirits who they pray to by name. And that's the reason why these white supremacists, they love chanting the names of their favorite little racist and bigots. These are demon spirits that they're worshiping. White supremacy has done that. When you see people lionizing and praising these evil monsters, that is them worshiping demons. These aren't just some degenerate human beings, though they were certainly the lowest form of reprobate. I'm telling you that the reason that they're so evil, the reason that these individuals are so demented in their mentality is that the dominant society gave itself over to evil a long time ago. And even so, you got some silly Negroes trying to convince themselves that these guys can be redeemed. Let it go. Learn to recognize evil when you see it. There are some who have tried to convince themselves whenever the dominant society uses a ballpark or they use a billboard or some time on television in order to lionize and praise some horrible racist and say, oh, we're going to give a tribute to this guy. The reason that they do that is they see themselves as being like the New Testament saints, the ones who were sacrificed in the arenas for the sick amusement of the Roman emperors. Well, that's not really true. These guys don't see themselves as being like the saints, sacrificing their lives for the greater good of Christianity. They see themselves as being the Caesars. They see themselves as being the emperors, and that they are sacrificing the lesser and the inferiors for their own power. They don't see themselves as worshiping any sort of benevolent God. Under white supremacy, the dominant societies see themselves as being God. And that's why the mental and spiritual perversion runs so deep and cannot be changed. What we have is a relentless, vicious cycle of self-adoration, the evil feeding on its own evil. And that's the reason why it just gets worse and worse and worse. There's no bottom here. That's why the dominant society takes so much time trying to control the history books, trying to seize your understanding of the past. Because the entire point of history under white supremacy, as Napoleon said, is that it's a lie agreed upon. And the lie has two facets. The first facet, of course, being a lie about progress. Things may not be perfect, but we're making a relentless march towards perfection. And today is certainly better than yesterday, when in actuality, the opposite is true. But the other aspect of all of that happens to be that they tell you the good guys won. That's one of the other quintessential lies that's emerged under white supremacy. The false concept of the idea that the good guys won. That's how they always tell the history, by the way. They always claim that in history, the good guys won. Isn't it miraculous how that always happens? But those of us who got our heads on straight, we know that the opposite occurred. The good guys did not win. How do we know? Because we are the good guys. And we can also look and see what it is that the dominant society does. Nothing good has come from it. So clearly the bad guys happen to be in charge, and we are waging a fight from our admittedly debilitated position to try to overthrow them. But make no mistake, the bad guys feel that they can draw a lot of strength and power from the demonic entities that they appeal to. The same way that we put virtuous people on a pedestal and we draw strength from the examples and the courage and the heroism of our heroes and sheroes of the past and present, the dominant society does the exact same things with the racists and reprobates from their own ranks. They draw strength, at least they get some vicious ideas for the next sick thing that they can do from these demented individuals who they decide that they're going to platform and put on a pedestal. So when somebody tells you that you need to observe some moment of silence for some racist reprobate, What they're basically saying is that they're going to be essentially conjuring magic and that they're going to be invoking some evil spirit, and they don't want you to disrupt any of that. To just meekly submit as demonic forces are invoked right in front of you, especially forces that spent their time trying to destroy the righteous. I sincerely hope that you are better than that. As I pointed out in last evening's address, make sure you remember who the individuals are who called themselves invoking the names of demon spirits and called themselves worshiping these evil forces right in front of you. Make sure you remember who it is, because what they're counting on is for people in general and Black people in specific to predictably have the same old, very short attention span. Whatever it is that they're upset about today, well, come this time tomorrow, they will have forgotten all about it, so it's a victimless crime. That's how they see it. Worshipping evil, invoking demons, and deciding that they're going to be exalting evil spirits over you, you got a choice to make. And the choice is whether or not you're going to meekly allow them to get away with it, or if they think that you're just going to sit on your hands while they openly praise and exalt every demonic and evil spirit they can think of. Let them know that there is no chance in hell. You may have to stand up to the bastards alone, but stand we will. Good day, and be one.
Coffee. Follow me.